Thank you for joining today's session, which is entitled Transform SAP Notifications Fast and Easy. Please note that your microphones are all muted. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A area at the bottom of the screen. We will pick up any questions at the end of the presentation. We're going to get started now. So I'd like to hand over to today's speaker, Chris Scott.
Thank you very much, Kate. So welcome along to our third webinar of the summer. For those who don't know me, my name is Chris Scott, and once again I am joined by Kate Tereshchenko and by Henry Blythe. In the previous webinars, I covered the introduction to Floe and the business case for implementing Floe. And then last time I went through a step-by-step instruction on setting up SAP to use Floe for operational document output, things like sales order output and delivery output. If you haven't seen the previous webinars, they are available on demand, and hopefully we've already sent you the links to the content. Once again, today's session is all new content, and I won't be repeating anything from the previous sessions. And also, once again, I'm expecting the session to last less than an hour, including plenty of time if there are questions to cover those at the end. So today we're going to focus on SAP process notifications, and in particular SAP workflow notifications. I will walk through the creation of a workflow notification email step by step and show how easy it is to make changes to an email once it has been set up. Once again, I'll be performing live demos throughout, so you can see everything is real. And of course, with live demos, there's always a chance that we might run into unforeseen difficulties, so let's hope everything runs smoothly. My objective today is to demonstrate in practical terms how you can start to replace plain workflow notification emails with something more engaging and usable with minimal development effort. So as I've described previously, Floe is delivered as an API, i.e. an SAP function module, and therefore we can trigger it from anywhere. In the main use cases, Floe is triggered either from an SAP process, like a workflow step or a print program, or from the mass correspondence tool that is included as part of Floe. And in all cases, the Floe API builds the email and passes it to the SAP Business Communication Service, which in turn routes it to an outbound email server. So today I'm going to start by looking at how we trigger Floe using an SAP workflow. Now, there are several ways of triggering process notifications from SAP, and we've looked at a variety of these with Floe. And the first scenario is where a workflow task is triggered and assigned to an agent, and we want to notify the user that they have a task assigned to them. And so this is the scenario I'm going to walk through in detail today. The second scenario is when a business event occurs inside SAP. This might be a change to some master data or to a business document, for example, a cost center change, or maybe a sales order change. Or it might be an event triggered at the end of a workflow. So in this scenario, we're typically informing people that something has happened already. And of course, they may then take some action following that notification. And the third scenario is where the notifications are built into the business process. So this might be a mix of notifications that work needs to be done or that work has been done, but the process isn't managed using an SAP workflow. So this is the kind of process we deliver with our products, Faro and Stalo. So hopefully I'll have time at the end to show you examples of all three. But for now, I'm going to push on with the workflow task example. So let's begin by looking at how it works. So from a simple point of view, something happens in SAP and then I receive an email. So let's look one step deeper. Actually, a workflow is triggered in SAP. It may be very simple or very complex and typically consists of a number of workflow tasks. When a workflow task is created, it is assigned to an agent, somebody to execute the next step of the process. And the agent might be informed through SAP Office or through Fiori Notification Center, or in other ways. But in our example, they're going to get informed by email. So inside SAP, a background job runs periodically and sends out all the notifications waiting to go. And then an email is sent out from SAP to the email server, and I receive it. So in order for us to use Floe for the formatting of that email, we look one step deeper still. So the workflow notification job calls an email handler, a method which is configured inside our workflow setup. And that needs to determine the Floe email type and then call the Floe API function. And then Floe looks after the email generation. So from a practical viewpoint, there are two important workflow settings that we need to change. Firstly, we need to determine the email handler. So we do that inside the normal workflow configuration, and it's a one-off setup. And there's nothing to develop. The new email handler for Floe is included as part of the Floe 200 software. And secondly, we need to determine the Floe email type. For this, we have a new configuration table that allows us to map a workflow task to a Floe email type. And of course, before we do this, we need to define our email type inside Floe. So let's start by setting up this basic configuration for a new email type. And then we can look at the workflow configuration and link this email type to a workflow task. Okay, so I'm going to start inside SAP GUI here. And first of all, I'll set up my email type in Floe. So I'll go to the IMG. And navigate through cross-application, general application, functions, Floe, and to maintain email types. And this is where I'm going to create a new email type for myself. And so first of all, I give it a code and a name. And give it a sender address. And save. Okay, so I've put the basic information for this email type in here. You can see I've put a variable inside the email subject. The reason there are two email subjects that we see here, one is the actual email subject that we'll see when we receive the email. The shorter one is just the email subject that we see in the SAP SOST transaction. So that's all the configuration I need to do to define this new email type. And in fact, before I do the workflow configuration, let's just take a look at the standard workflow output. This is an IDES system, so it's we haven't changed anything. This is as delivered by SAP. I'm going to go to the workflow test tool and choose myself a workflow here, and just execute this. And this is an absence notification. We'll put the same data in every time so we can see, we can compare the output. Let's say 5 hours, special leave. Okay, and we'll save that. So this instigates a new workflow. I can see a task has been assigned. So now I need to process that task in order to output the email. So I do that with a program that often runs in the background. And I'll just execute this to push any notifications out. And I can see one went. So the next thing that should happen is that I should receive an email. So I'll open up my Outlook, and here one has arrived. And so this is the standard workflow email. And so I can see that some information from the workflow. I can see a date, I can see a name, I can see a link to the workflow inbox. It's a SAP GUI link and a couple of links to display or execute the work item, again in the SAP GUI. So that's the standard workflow in this particular system. So this is what we're looking to replace. So first of all, I'll go to the workflow configuration. I'm going to go right down to the bottom to the deliverer. This is the workflow handler that we want to replace, the delivered one with a new one that sits in the Floe namespace. So I'll save that. So of course you may have all your own workflow configuration in here. We don't need to change anything other than this email handler field. And so then the next thing I can do is make that mapping from the workflow task to my email type. I'm going to go into a table here to make that mapping. And I've already put an entry inside here. This is the task I'm interested in. I just need to pop in my new email type here. And it's WFX1. And save that. And that's it. That's all the configuration I need to do. Obviously, the email right now has no content, so we're not ready to test it right now. So I'll go back to my slides. So now I've done the configuration, I can focus on the design of the email type, and we do that using Floe Email Builder. In this example, we're looking at a workflow for an absence request, and one employee makes the request, and the task for approval is created for the line manager to approve the request. And so we can pass some information from that request inside the body of the email. So this is the kind of information that can be carried around in the workflow. And so we enter that data, as you saw, using that test tool. And so we can decide of this information which fields do we want to appear inside the body of this particular email. And so this is what we're going to build now. I've taken some of those fields. I've not bothered with the repeating row at this point, but I could if I so wished. And so take the name, department, reason, contact at, and the task description actually comes from the workflow definition. So let's go ahead now and build this email in Email Builder. So I'll just refresh this screen. I should then see the new email type down in my demo category. Here it is. First of all, it asked me for a basic template, which really defines some colors and a width and first language. So I'm going to accept the defaults. And then I can start building content. Well, as usual, to speed things along, I've built some library content already. And so I'll just search for workflow. So I'll take that header. And then again, that body. That button. I'm going to drag in a a banner. This one will be fine, and some social media. And of course, these particular pieces of the jigsaw will be used across many different email types. I think I'll add a separator around this block here, and say let's have it as a 1 pixel solid line, and it can be black. That's fine. So I'll set that, and then I will copy that, move that there. So you can see, obviously, I had some of this information already built, but I've put that together very quickly. I'll save that. We're going to come back later and make some edits to this. Now you can see in this particular panel here a whole bunch of variables that I've used inside this email type. And so, of course, for business users, it may not be obvious what the variables are and where to find them. From a developer, would be able to look at the workflow container and see what data is available to include in the email. But I thought it was good to show a nice little trick we have in order to get Floe to tell us what emails, what variables are available. And so for that purpose, just make sure I've saved that. For that purpose, I've created another email type, show workflow container contents. In there, I'm just saying, show me all the variables. And so what I'll do now is attach this workflow, this email type to the workflow, and run the test again so that we can see all the different variables and their values. So now I'll go back to the test, the configuration table, and temporarily just change this to that email type, which I think is the one I was looking at, WFL5. Yep. And I'll save that. And then we'll do another quick test using the test tool. Put the same data in again. And save. And then we have to push it out. And as I'm doing this manually, so rather than setting up a job, so we don't have to wait for the job to run each time. So now I should see a new email arrive. And so here's this the email. So now I can see all the different variables that are available to me and what data they have inside them, so that I can choose to include this inside the Floe email. So for example, if I was going to choose that holiday type, I'm getting a code rather than a description. So I would need to add a little bit of code to go and fetch the description for that particular code. As it is, the variables I've chosen don't need any further lookups. I'm pulling them straight out of here. So that's just to show you a quick way of getting the variable names. Let's go back and change that configuration back. And save that again. Okay, so now we can consider the user exits. So as I say, we use these user exits to look up values or to make dates more readable, to basically add to the data that we've got inside the workflow container in case there's something else we want to see inside the email. So we're going to take a look at the email data user exit. There is one variable that is not filled automatically, which is the URL path to process the workflow item. So we're going to add some code to put that path together. And of course, it might be that we want to point the user to their SAP inbox, or to a Fiori inbox, or to a custom BSP screen to process the workflow item. In our case, we're going to point to a workflow task in the HTML SAP GUI. So I'm going to add in that bit of code. Secondly, the standard SAP behavior we saw was to add some links as attachment files in this particular version of SAP. So if I pull that first email up again, we can see these attachments, and they're just links to open SAP GUI locally. So I don't want these, so I'm going to add a second user exit just to delete these attachments from the outbound email. So those are the two bits of logic I want to add. So that's inside the determine data user exit, and then the determine attachments user exit. So we go back to the SAP GUI and back to the IMG, and back to Floe. And so now I'm going into the maintain email type user exits. And it was in my demo category. And there's my absence request notification email type. So I shall generate user exits. And everyone looks away while I make it a local object for the demo. And I can see there's various user exits that I can add my logic to. Well, again, I've already got some logic already to steal, so I'll just go into one I did earlier and copy this and pop it into this user exit here. And so what we're doing here is, first of all, we're reading a particular variable code to get the work item and setting a variable up. And then we're looking up the virtual host, eventually the server name and the port in order to point to the particular SAP system. And then I know the rest of the path to get into there. I'm setting the SAP themes with blue crystal in this scenario, and passing in the transaction code here, and saying execute, and also pushing in the task ID for this particular workflow item. So all that goes into this URL, and then we fill that into this variable called execute URL, which indeed is used inside the email builder. Also, we are adding a theme to the inbox URL, which is pre-delivered. So that one, the workflow gives me for free the link to the inbox. We're adding to that a theme to make it look a bit nicer. So that's all that's going on here. Looks a bit hard, but again, this is a real quick copy and paste moment, and of course, all this code is available on the Floe wiki. I'll activate that, and that's my first user exit completed. And then I want to go into the attachment user exit. And in here, this is a lot simpler. I just want to get rid of anything that's already there. So I'm just going to say refresh the attachments table, and that will empty that out nicely. Okay, so now we're ready to do a complete test. And so I'll again go back to the test tool and create a new instance of this workflow. pop the same data in again. And trigger that. That started. So now I will push the notification out. And one has gone. I can look at it is arriving. And so now we see the new email and the variables have now been filled from the workflow container. And again, the only code I required was to add this particular link to process that item. To put that link together. Okay. So now we've got the completed email. It might be that we want to make a change, maybe change some text or add a variable or change the banner. So let's now see how easy that would be to do, perhaps for a business user rather than somebody who knew anything at all about workflow. So we're going to do this again in the email builder tool. And so I'm going to just open up my particular email type that I'd like to change. So first of all, it may be I want to change some of this text. Because this is a library object, I need to either copy it or bring it out of the library. So I'll just bring it out of the library like that. Now this becomes editable. So maybe I want to add in a cost center field in here. So I could say, just type into this cost center. We'll choose the American spelling, and then I can refer back to find out what that the variable was called, my other email. So back in here, I could see that the cost center field was called cost center. So I put ampersand around that. And we can save that. Now I need to make that bold and make it match everything else. So I'll just highlight that. Make that bold. Okay. Let's go ahead and change this banner. So we'll just drag in something else from the library. Something like this. And we can just remove that one. So we've changed some text, just using the text editor, changed the banner using the library, and hit save. And straight away we can do another test to see those changes in place. So there's the same data added again. Let's trigger the outbound notification. That's gone. So you should see it arrive. Here it is. And so now I can see that the text has been changed, a new variable has been added, and that banner was changed. Now it might be that we want the cost center name instead of the code, in which case we would need to add a select statement in the user exit. But there are a lot of changes we can do that don't require that extra ABAP coding. If the information is there in the is available to me, then it can go straight in the body of the email, and you can see just how easy that is to achieve. Okay, so we've covered at length there the workflow task scenario, but I've got time now just to show you examples of the other two scenarios here, the business event and the app process emails, because I think that'll be interesting. So we trigger those in slightly different ways. So the business event one we can do is, let's say, change a cost center. So let's navigate to controlling and cost center accounting, master data, cost center change, and the controlling area, I think is 1,000. And I can choose any, but I've got one here or earlier. So let's just make some changes. Let's change the person responsible, and a couple of field changes there, and hit save. Now, when I hit save, there a business event is triggered. That in turn triggers a outbound email. Here it's arrived, and so I'm notified that this particular user has made a change to a particular cost center. That's its code and that's its name on date, time, old value, new value for the fields that have changed. And so this particular email type, if we look in the email builder, hasn't been designed for cost center changes. It's been designed for any changes. So I've forgotten which one it is now. Yeah, we'll come back to it later. But I can trigger, using that same email type, I can trigger a different email for a different change. In fact, let's do that. Let's change a customer credit limit. And so we'll go to, this time we'll go into logistics and sales master data, into a customer. In fact, credit limit's not there, is it? It's saying accounting. And to accounts receivable, credit management, and master data change. And so let's see if we can find a, oh, there we go, there's one, and credit control area. Okay, so here I see the credit limit is 35,000, and let's change that to, say, 40,000, and hit save. Now that triggers a different business event, but we're passing the change data into exactly the same email type. And so what we see is this is precisely the same email type, but now it tells me that a customer has been updated. So again, I see the user, what they've changed, the actual code and the description, and which fields were changed. And so it's exactly the same email type, we're just passing different information inside it. So those are business event triggers. Something happened inside SAP, and we decide to tell people about that. The third one is a different process notification. So this is something I can show you from a Stalo app. So I'll log on to a Launchpad and open a Stalo app. I'll choose any employee here and add some information. And so I've submitted that. So in our language, this form or this app, this document has now been submitted. It's going to be routed to somebody else for approval. We trigger a notification to that person in order to do some work, and it should just arrive. And so we'll give that a minute or two because it hasn't arrived immediately. I think maybe there's a background check we're waiting for in that particular case. Here it is. And so a slightly different email look and feel, but you get the idea. We've got some information inside the body of the email, and this time it's not coming from a workflow container, it's coming from the data in the app. So the fields I've defined inside that Fiori app are being made available inside Floe, inside the email builder, so that I can map any app field in this in this particular notification email rather than the workflow. Okay, so finally, just to bring that together in a little summary. Today we've seen how to build a powerful workflow email with ease, including all the configuration and all the development steps. We've seen how easy it is to make a change to an email content once we've got the email defined. And we've seen that the whole end-to-end development process actually requires minimal app code and no HTML code at all. And so increasingly emails can be owned by business users and changed periodically, often without involving IT at all. So that brings me to the end of the presentation today, and I hope you found it both interesting and informative. There's one more Floe webinar to come, in which I'll be focusing on mass correspondence scenarios, including how to set up mail lists and to build dynamic content so that each email recipient receives tailored email content. So I hope there's some interest and you can join me on that next session. In the meantime, I'd like to remind you that we'd love you to try Floe for yourselves if you haven't. We have a system that you can access via the web and play with the Floe email builder to create your own emails. There's nothing to install. We'll just provide you with a user and log on to one of our systems, and away you go. So there's a form on the Floe website through which you can request access. Another option is to install the software on your own SAP system for a 60-day free trial, and we're happy for you to use it however you want, even in production. And there's a request form on the website for that. Just fill that in and we'll send you the software, installation guide, and everything else you need to get going. So I'll send everyone an invitation to the next session, so there's no need to register again. And finally, of course, there is lots of information available on the Floe website, floe.com. And in fact, the demonstrations I've done today are there on a new page. So I can just open the Floe website. Underneath more and demonstration, we can see the document output examples, use cases that we talked about last time, and then the process notifications. So we see a workflow, business event, and Fiori app notifications. So these are the same demos that I've been through today, available to see again at your leisure. So with that, I'll hand back to Kate to review any questions.
Thank you, Chris. I do have one question here from Chloe. She's asking how much consulting is involved here.
Well, it kind of it all depends. It might be none. It might be as little as none. You can see that there's minimal setup. Hopefully, there should be no workflow consulting required because we're talking about adding emails to your existing workflows. There may be a small amount of ABAP user exit depending upon the information you want to have inside your emails. And if you need help with that, then of course we'd be delighted to provide that help. But in general, if you have a few technical skills, you should be able to go ahead and do the whole thing without any consulting.
Thank you, Chris. So if there are no more questions, I think that brings us to the end of the session today. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and we hope you'll join us next time as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.